Hey everyone, welcome back to Mindful Athlete. As you can see from the title of the video and from the shirt that I am wearing, this video is going to be about Canada women's soccer team and all of the craziness that's unfortunately come out this past week after they were caught using a drone to try and spy on Team New Zealand's training session. Now, obviously, I have a personal interest in this story as I am from Canada, so I'm just going to be talking about what we know so far, what the reaction has been from fans, media, as well as what the potential punishment, if any, may be. Okay, so Tuesday, July 23rd, just before 6 p.m. my time, which means it would have been just before midnight in France, there was breaking news across multiple media outlets indicating that Team New Zealand's women's soccer team had claimed that Canada Soccer had used drone surveillance to spy over their training session the day before. So it would have been July 22nd. And in their statement, they said they had put in a formal complaint to the IOC, which is the International Olympic Committee. So shortly after that, the Canadian Olympic Committee came out and made their own statement saying, "The Canadian Olympic Committee was made aware that a non-accredited member of the Canada Soccer support team was detained by French authorities." So basically, they were caught by the French police. So this happened in Saint-Etienne following a complaint by New Zealand Football on July 22nd. Now, the rest of the statement basically just goes on to say that the Canadian Olympic Committee is shocked and this goes against their values, that they apologize to New Zealand football, the players, the New Zealand Olympic Committee, and basically that they're working with FIFA and the IOC in Paris 2024 and Canada Soccer to figure out what happened. So this happened Tuesday evening, my time. Okay, next morning, we finally found out some additional information about who this non-accredited member was. So his name is Joseph Lombardi. He was a performance analyst for the Canada women's soccer team. I say was because his information is no longer showing on the team website, unfortunately. After all of this information came out, he was removed from the team. But he was a performance analyst. And what we found out is that Team New Zealand was doing a training session on Monday, July 22nd, when they noticed a drone flying above them and they notified the French authorities. They came and they caught Joseph, who was in the process of retrieving the drone from the sky. So basically caught red-handed. And so they detained him right away and they took him in. It's against the law to be using drones. So they took him in for questioning, where he basically admitted to everything. He admitted to not only recording that Monday, July 22nd training session, but he also admitted to filming July 19th's training session, so 3 days before. So New Zealand didn't even know about the July 19th one. They only knew about the 22nd, but Lombardi confirmed he did it twice. Now, Joseph Lombardi reports to Jasmine Mander, who is one of the assistant coaches for Canada. And I guess through looking at text messages, they were able to see that Joseph and Jasmine had been in communication. And so it was very obvious that Jasmine knew where he was, that he had gone to the New Zealand training session, and she was aware that he was using a drone. So naturally, they called her in for questioning as well. However, she said that she had nothing to do with the drone incident. So it sounds to me like she's acknowledging that she knew where he was and what he was doing, but that she didn't tell him to do it. And I guess the French authorities agreed with that because she wasn't charged and they basically released her. Joseph, unfortunately, as I mentioned, it's against the law to use a drone, so he was charged and found guilty and given an 8-month suspended sentence. The fallout from all of this is that Joseph and Jasmine were actually removed from Canada women's soccer team, put on a plane, and sent back to Canada. Okay, so Bev Priesman, who's the head coach of Canada women's soccer team, was asked, did she know about any of this stuff that was happening? And this is what she had to say.
First of all, I'd like to apologise. I think on behalf of the leader of this programme, I think on behalf of, I'm ultimately accountable. I think that's why it was really important to me, I think, to take this moment to show strong leadership and to represent the values of this country, of the team, and of myself. And I think, I've done that because I deeply care about sportsmanship, integrity. And to be honest, the players who are in the field, I think both teams are working very hard. The preparation has been for many months to this moment. And ultimately, I am accountable for any action that happens inside of this camp. And for that matter, I think it was really important to step back.
Yeah, well, so obviously I couldn't play the entire clip. She actually gave a really long response, but the most important thing to know is that she didn't answer the question. She was given a clear opportunity to say either, yes, I knew about the drones, or no, I had no idea. And she didn't say either of those things. She basically just, said as head coach, she holds herself accountable to the actions of her staff in the camp. And so for that reason, she would sit out Game 1 versus New Zealand and not coach it. But in terms of answering the question of whether she knew or not, she gave a non-answer. And to me, a non-answer, personally, in my opinion, screams she knew what was happening. I mean, to be honest, regardless of her response, I just think it's impossible for a head coach like her to be unaware that her assistant coach and her performance analyst are off flying drones over New Zealand's camp and she has no idea. I don't think that's possible. I think she knew. Now, do I think she's the commander who's telling everyone to do this? Not necessarily. This is probably, or most likely, predates Bev Priestman, but I think she knew what was happening. But regardless of my opinion on whether Bev knew or didn't know, the Canadian Olympic Committee seemed to be quite satisfied with Canada's response, which was basically to remove Joseph Lombardi and Jasmine Mander from the team and for Bev Priestman to sit out Game 1 versus New Zealand. As for Canada Soccer, they had announced that they would open their own external independent investigation into seeing what would happen. And the New Zealand Olympic Committee also requested that FIFA and the International Olympic Committee open their own investigation into the situation. So this is the opening day of the women's soccer games at the Olympics. In terms of Canada versus New Zealand's history, they have 10 wins, 4 draws, and 1 loss. And the 1 loss they had was from 1987. So a lot of the stuff that had come out, especially from fans, was questioning why Canada even used a drone against New Zealand because of their success. No one really knows except for them. But what we do know is that the game started, and in the 13th minute, New Zealand scored. So, I mean, I think you couldn't really write a better script. It was quite incredible to see, just given everything that had happened. But that didn't last. By the end of the half, it was tied 1-1. Chloe Lacasse had tied it. By the end of the game, Canada had won 2-1. So anyways, the rest of the women's soccer games happen, and we don't really hear anything else until 7:30 p.m. TSN journalist Rick Westhead releases a bombshell report, which basically blows the story wide open. And it indicates that Canada Soccer men's team and women's team have been using drones to spy on their opponents for years. So yeah, turns out spying on New Zealand on July 19th wasn't the first time that Team Canada had done it. And Rick Westhead's report was able to outline a really long timeline of what happened. And it includes 2019, the Canadian men's national team used a drone to record a U.S. training session in Florida. They ultimately lost 4-1. So yeah, the drone recording did not help them. Then in 2021, Honduras men stopped a training session because they saw a drone flying overhead in Toronto. Again, it was the Canadian men's national team who was responsible for this. Still in 2021, the Canadian women's national team filmed 2 closed-door sessions for Japan at the Tokyo Olympics. Now, this one was shocking to a lot of people because if you recall, the Tokyo Olympics happened during COVID restrictions. There was questions asked about if there were any other teams at the Olympics that Canada had spied on, and there hasn't been a clear answer given on that. Obviously, that's very important to know because Canada won the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. They won gold medal. And so if it turns out they were spying on everyone, then now there's a little bit of concern that something may happen to their gold medal. But continuing with the timeline. 2022, Panama women complained to Canada Soccer and CONCACAF about their training sessions being filmed by the Canadian women's national team. And then in 2023, a Canada Soccer contractor had his trip canceled after he refused to film at the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup in Australia. And basically, he was replaced by a member of Canada Soccer staff who ended up going to Australia and doing the filming themselves. And then lastly, the news that we found out this week, which is Canada Women's National Team flying a drone over New Zealand's training sessions. This is a story that people probably thought was a one-off, and it's turned out to be something that has been happening for years. My timeline, which is from Rick Westhead's article, starts in 2019, but let's be real, it's totally possible that they've been filming from even before then. So after this big report came out and everything was basically revealed that this has been happening for years on both the men and women's team, Bev Priesman, who was basically patting herself on the back for showing leadership to sit out game one, was now going to be sitting out all of the games because she was also removed from the women's team and sent home. Now, Canada Soccer decided that they were going to suspend her for the rest of the Paris Olympics as they completed this investigation, and it was absolutely the right call. As I mentioned earlier, I didn't believe that there's no way she didn't know what Joseph Lombardi and Jasmine Mander had been up to. So for the remainder of the games, Andy Spence, who is the assistant coach for Canada, will be doing the rest of the games. Okay, so what has the reaction been to all of this? It's been a bit of a mixed bag, to be honest. There are some people who are actually saying, yeah, good for Canada. This shows their competitiveness and how much they care about soccer and that they're willing to do anything to win. And so there are genuinely people who think this reflects good on Canada and their desire to win. There are other people who are at the complete opposite of the spectrum who are basically condemning Canada, saying they're cheats, they're frauds, they're horrible, they should be kicked out of the Olympics, their gold medal should be taken away from them, or they should forfeit their points versus New Zealand. Like, they're getting a lot of hate. I will say it's mostly directed towards staff. It's not directed towards the players, who really don't seem to have had any idea what was going on. And then there are a bunch of other people who are basically saying, so what? Everyone does this. I think a common one that was getting mentioned was Marcelo Bielsa. He is the former Leeds coach, current Uruguay coach. And in 2019, he made headlines after basically openly admitting to spying on teams all the time. He said, I observed all the rivals we played against and watched the training sessions of all opponents. Watching the opponent's training allows us to have less anxiety, and in my case, I'm stupid enough to allow this kind of behavior. And in 2018, in the German Bundesliga, Werder Bremen used a drone to spy on Hoffenheim, and then coach of Hoffenheim, Julian Nagelsmann, brushed it off and basically commended Bremen for going to such lengths to try and win. So again, it just goes to show how people feel very differently about this. Some people are saying good for Canada. Some people are saying kick Canada out. And other people are like, I don't know why we're making such a big deal. Everyone does this. In terms of my opinion on this, I don't think Canada women are the first and only to do this. I think we were just dumb enough to get caught, unfortunately. I mean, using a drone, drones can be loud, they can be seen, and it's illegal to use in France. Like, what? I don't know what they were thinking. They obviously weren't thinking, but it just goes to show, because they were doing it for so many years, they probably didn't even think twice about the fact that they shouldn't be doing it at the Olympics and they shouldn't be doing it in a country that it was illegal. Now, do I think that you can get a competitive advantage of watching the training sessions of your opponent? Absolutely. I do think that it can give some advantage, but personally, to me, I don't think it can give you an advantage to win a game over 90 minutes. Teams do adjustments all the time, especially at halftime. And so if anything, I think that a training session, like having footage to a training session, could help with at most the first half. But if the opponents see that you're doing really well with their tactics, they're going to switch it up in the second half, and you wouldn't have necessarily prepared for that. But regardless of whether the footage can truly help a team over 90 minutes, kind of doesn't matter for me. I think it's more of like the spirit of the game. People see it as cheating. It is an unfair advantage. And so I understand if there's going to be a punishment. So in terms of the punishment, I've kind of alluded to it before, but there's been a few options that I've seen thrown out there. I know for sure that the New Zealand Olympic Committee indicated that they didn't want Canada to get any points from game one. Now, this is not the same as forfeiting points. Forfeiting points would be giving 3 points to New Zealand. New Zealand didn't ask for that. They just basically indicated if the game ends with Canada winning, which is what happened, Canada is not going to get the 3 points. Both teams will get 0 points. But there have been other options that have been thrown out there, which include the team forfeiting the points, which is what I just mentioned. So New Zealand gets the 3. Also mentioned is Canada should potentially be kicked out and disqualified from the tournament. And then in terms of the Tokyo Olympics, because we found out that they for sure at least spied on Japan, some people are saying that a potential punishment is that they will lose the gold medal. And then there are some people who think that a fine is enough. They don't need to lose points. They don't need to be kicked out. They just need a hefty fine. So there's a bunch of different options. Okay, Saturday afternoon, a decision was made by FIFA on what to do, and turns out it was neither of the 4 options I mentioned. They decided to deduct 6 points from Canada. Canada Soccer has also been fined the equivalent of about $313,000 Canadian. And head coach Bev Priesman, along with Jasmine Mander and Joseph Lombardi, have been suspended from football activities for 1 year. So, wow. I'm not sure what I expected, but I don't think it was this. With only 3 group games at the Olympics, deducting anything more than 3 points is making it nearly impossible to make it out of the group. So I honestly thought it would be 3 points or just straight up full disqualification. But personally, if you're not disqualifying the team, then 6 points feels excessive to me. I honestly thought forfeiting or not awarding Canada points for their New Zealand win made sense. But looks like FIFA may have wanted to make a point, especially with Canada's history of doing this more than once. So they're using a harsh punishment to limit this from happening in the future. It's unfortunate, but mistakes get punished, and that's what we're seeing here. Anyways, I'll finish off the video now. Honestly, I'm not sure. I think I lean towards New Zealand's option of Canada just doesn't get the points for the last game. Sometimes you want to make an example out of a team, and so I'd understand if they want to make an example out of Canada. And so if they don't get points from that, I think that would be pretty fair. But anyways, this video ended up being a bit longer than I was expecting it to be, but there was a lot of details that have come out over these past 4 days that I really wanted to share with all of you. I don't know, after hearing all of this, let me know what you think about the situation and what type of punishment, if any, you think that the Canadian women's soccer team should face. But again, thanks so much for watching the video, and I will catch you guys in the next one.